Only after he died did I realise how much my father did in his life, and how much he meant to other people. Do you miss him?
Oh yeah, yes. Oh yeah, I miss Philip, yeah.
Just like to think that, in a way, the things that I've been able to do over the years is a sort of small repayment of what he did for me.
He was a really, really wonderful colleague, somebody you could depend on, always.
Growing up, I only remembered him as an MP, constantly working. I knew he had another career before Parliament, I just didn't really know anything about it. Making this film has made me understand the impact he made in television, before I was even born. Philip was born in 1937 in Roseley, Derbyshire, to adoptive parents Harold and Frances Whitehead. As an only child, he developed a love of books and was quickly marked out as an exceptional student. By 14, his Russian teacher declared there was nothing further he could teach him. Philip had surpassed him. He shot like a rocket from his humble beginnings. An exhibition to Oxford, President of the Oxford Union, and in 1961 a general traineeship to the BBC.
Philip was a star of the BBC's current affairs group. He had a terrific track record on a programme called Gallery. When I was at the BBC doing Panorama, Philip made at least a couple of really cracking good, one subject, 40-minute long panorama films for me. One was about Egypt under Nasser, one of the first, perhaps the first interview with Nasser John Morgan got since Suez.
Looking around the world, looking around Africa, for example, where leaders have disappeared, like Nkrumah, like Ben Bella, do you find it surprising that you've been able to stay in office for so long, for 14 years?
The group was not a small group, and I am depending on strong people, not puppets.
Philip was very engaged in the tough politics of Panorama at that time. Panorama was embattled.
I was doing Panorama, and I turned it into a one-subject programme, and I worked with good people, of whom Philip was one. But the BBC changed its mind about whether, or my boss at the BBC changed his mind as to whether they wanted a one-subject programme or not. They asked me to go back to a magazine programme. I refused to do so, and I left the BBC. This is almost the last discussion I ever had with Philip. He reminded me forcibly that I had asked him to come to Rediffusion and produce This Week, which he did.
In its heyday in the late 1960s, This Week produced powerful reporter-led documentaries from around the world that ran at prime time on ITV and regularly got 12 million viewers, something current affairs producers today can only dream about. Under Jeremy Isaac's stewardship, Philip edited the programme from 1967 to 1970. Peter Taylor worked first as a researcher for Philip and then as a reporter.
Shops like this in Columbus, Ohio don't just sell books, they also sell toys. Not toys for little children, toys for grown men. They sell things like this, a fully inflatable, life-size latex doll. This is the deluxe model because it comes complete with a hair. The gentleman inside the shop told me that you inflate it first.
He was fearsome because he was just so clever. I mean, he had a massive intellect. And he was an incredibly clear thinker, knew exactly what he wanted, knew what the story was, didn't take any nonsense.
Philip's expectations of reporters knew no bounds. In one memorable instant, he asked fledgling reporter John Edwards to recreate Teddy Kennedy's infamous swim from the scene of his car crash at Chappaquiddick.
Many local people don't believe Kennedy could have swum across, so I decided to try the swim myself. Well, all I can say is that it is possible.
I think that Phillip was the best editor this week ever had, and for me, the best current affairs producer that British television in its heyday ever had either.
What stood out for me about Phillip as a producer at the beginning and always was that he had, in addition to the characteristics that producers need of good humour and understanding of people and an ability to coax them and chivvy them to do well, Phillip had a keen mind and, above absolutely everything else, an honest mind. There isn't a single Phillip Whitehead produced current affairs programme or documentary that you could find or point to that seeks to make an effect for effect's sake. There's a steel-like structure of integrity running through absolutely everything he did.
One of the things about Phillip was that he knew so much. I mean, he really was a very, very well-informed man, an extraordinarily attentive mind. We all like to think we hold on to things, but Phillip was extraordinarily attentive. He absolutely loved to talk, and so do I, as you can hear from this. But in Phillip, I mainly listened. It was almost like you had this incredible intellectual jukebox in front of you. You'd ask a question and out it would pour, and you'd ask another question and out it would pour, and it would come, and that was great.
Phillip had this amazing range of expertise. American politics, railways, Czechoslovakia, don't ask me why.
Czechoslovakia, August 1968.
I was sent by him, met up with a cameraman, we shot covertly, smuggled the footage out, and it was all included in a wonderful, wonderful film that Robert Key wrote and presented called Remember Czechoslovakia.
But only Phillip, you see, with a sense of history, could react to the events of August 1968 with the Soviet tanks in the streets of Prague by saying, this isn't the first time that Czechoslovakia has been, in effect, invaded and taken over by powers bigger than itself.
No one spoke of the French alliance. 1/4 of Czechoslovakia was signed away to Germany.
Philip and Jeremy, and Philip in particular, because I was working directly to Philip, taught me most of what I know. He taught me about the ethics of the business, the need for rigour, the need not to take no for an answer, the need to question all the time. And if I wasn't sure, not to pretend that I was sure. And I think the word that sums up what he stood for and what he taught me was integrity.
In 1969, whilst editing This Week, I came along, and my career path seemed preordained. But my presence didn't stop him launching into another hugely important new series.
But The Day Before Yesterday was a forerunner of all the contemporary history programs that we've got used to. Without The Day Before Yesterday, there would never have been a World at War, or the Brian Lapping documentaries, like Death of Yugoslavia.
But the president of the Board of Trade, Harold Wilson, at home with his family, still had to be circumspect when asked officially if he liked long or short skirts.
Oh, that old question. Well, it isn't for me to say how the long skirts and the short skirts look, though, of course, I have my own private views on that matter.
The Day Before Yesterday was an important series to me, and I also think it was important to people interested in history on television. It was almost living history. It wasn't the history of the present, but as the title indicates, it was the history of the very recent past.
What was remarkable about the day before yesterday, it was the first really thoughtful, well-informed attempt to deal with contemporary politics using the politicians of the day.
I thought it was wonderful. I mean, Philip nearly drove all of us dotty in making it, because within you know, there were 6 hours, and within a week of it going on the air, not one of them was finished. I mean, it was appalling.
Setting out on his campaign trail is the Labour candidate Philip Whitehead, age 41.
Philip was driven to change Britain for the better, and television was a way of influencing people. But a far more direct method was to enter Parliament. In 1970, he was elected MP for Derby North. His political career was, however, short-lived, curtailed by the Thatcher landslide in 1983, when he lost his seat.
From his mid-20s, it was pretty clear to everyone who knew him that however good he was as a producer, he really wanted to be a politician. That's what drove him most.
We've helped you. Now we need you to help us. We can only get that support if you will turn out on the day and vote for us here in Derby North.
When you tried to be an MP, I used to take at least a week or so off work and go up to Derbyshire and canvass and go to meetings, and so did David Holstein, so did a few of us went up there and bossed around by John, the agent, told what to do, given your own area to go and canvass, knocking on the door.
I had no doubt that Philip would have gone on to become a minister holding one of the great offices of state, like possibly Home Secretary. Possibly Prime Minister, one doesn't know, but he had the ability, he had the intellect.
It's one of, I guess, the tragedies of life generally, that his political career in the UK never ever delivered half of what he had already delivered in public significance as a producer of television programmes.
So Dad returned to television, joining Brook Productions and continuing where he'd left off, making series on the Ganleys, the Windsors and many more, winning an Emmy in 1997 for his series on the Kennedy family.
For me, Philip was an outstanding producer of This Week, and I think that The Day Before Yesterday and The Writing on the Wall, which came to Channel 4, were outstanding examples of what you have to call recent history series. And in effect, they showed all sorts of other people what was possible.
In 1994, Philip was elected as an MEP, and with all the travelling, documentaries took a back seat. So in one lifetime, he managed to fit in not one but 3 careers. It's no wonder we barely saw him. He gave his time to so many different people and causes, but when he was there, he was always, without fail, late.
Yes, he was compulsively late. I mean, this cramming everything in, combined with giving everybody proper time, was a complete recipe for disaster. You can't do twice as much work as everybody else in one day and spend with everybody who had twice as much time with them as anybody else. The maths don't work.
One would wait around, you'd make an appointment to see Philip, or you make an appointment for him to come and view a rough cut or a fine cut, and you'd sit around, and eventually, that eventually could be half an hour, it could be an hour, it could be several hours. I think it could even be a day.
There's a horrendous story, which I believe is true, of Philip looking reproachfully at the film editor who was looking reproachfully at him, and he saying to him, "I'm only an hour late," to which the film editor replied, "Philip, a day and an hour late."
How do you describe Philip's dress sense? Crime against fashion? Old friends. I think his dress sense was phenomenal.
Philip dressed casually but badly. I don't think the idea of dress and sense had any meaning for him at all, really. I think if, if Christine had put out a sort of a coal sack beside it and got into it without really noticing what it was.
He was the very opposite of trendy. But you could look at Philip and you knew that clothes didn't matter to him very much. Expensive meals didn't matter to him very much. Drink didn't matter to him very much. What he cared about were ideas, and he cared about getting it right.
Philip had a terrific sense of humour, and one of the reasons why he was such a great person to work with and for was that on the one side he had this fierce intellect, this fierce rigour that he applied to the work that he did and wished us to apply to the work that we did for him. But on the other side, he had this sort of impish sense of humour. He did, which I think is quite rare for someone of his intellect, he did enjoy the gossip, he did enjoy the small talk, he did enjoy the jokes.
I'm confident that if Philip had remained a full-time television executive, he would have been the most remarkable of all of those people, including David Plowright, Jeremy Isaacs, Dennis Foreman, John Burt.
There's a sort of friendship that is terrific in your life. We became friends on that first day in 1961, and we were always fast friends. Now, if we didn't see each other a while, it didn't matter, you just took up where you left off. There are 2 or 3 of those friendships in your life, and they're rare and they're really valuable.
He was very, very special, and I think we all owe him a huge amount. I owe him a huge amount, and I think the world of television and current affairs and politics owe him a huge amount, and that's that's his legacy, and we'll never forget it.
I never understood my dad until it was too late. I was bitter he wasn't there enough for me, and for us as a family. But now he's gone, I've reconciled with him. I've learned that he loved his work, and that with his intellect, his energy and his drive, family life was a small part of who he was. I just wish he was still around so he could understand me as well as I now understand him.